What happens when a tourist decides to put lipstick on a guard at Buckingham Palace? She thinks it's just a show, but things don't go as planned. And now the entire internet is shaming her. London was going about its usual routine. Tourists crowded in front of Buckingham Palace, taking endless selfies, red buses languidly rolled through the streets, and a cool breeze stirred the golden leaves in St. James's Park. But one tourist wasn't interested in any of it. Karen Lambert wasn't here for the sights. She was here for content. A very overweight, heavy-set woman whose body was literally bulging out of tight leopard print leggings, she stomped through the square, her sneakers squeaking loudly. She wore a black, glittery t-shirt with the bold phrase "Queen of Drama" stretched over her large stomach. Her face was painted like a party cake, thick layers of foundation, orange cheeks, thick eyeliner, and bright, gaudy raspberry lipstick. But the main feature of her look was her neon nails. Long, thick, shiny, in acidic colors. They clacked on the screen of her phone as Karen was streaming live for her followers. "Hey people, I'm in London," she screeched into the camera, drowning out the street noise. Comments flooded in the chat. Instantly. "Oh my God, it's her." "Karen, please don't cause a scene, LOL. We need content, do a show." "Did you already argue with the waiter?" Karen snorted with contempt, as if offended. "You seriously think I just came here for no reason? Of course I'm going to put on a show, just wait." When Karen saw him, she swiveled the camera around, scanning the square until she saw him. Standing by the massive black gates of Buckingham Palace, he was the perfect target. The Royal Guard. A tall, fit man in an impeccably red uniform, with a giant bearskin hat on his head. He stood absolutely still, like a wax figure. Tourists gathered around him. Some took selfies with him. Others made faces in front of him, and one guy even waved his hand in front of his face to see if he'd blink. But he didn't move. At all. Karen took a long look at him, and then it hit her. She laughed out loud as if a brilliant idea had just come to her. "OMG, he's perfect. So stubborn like my ex when I demanded he give me back my car." She smiled widely, licked her fat lips, and pulled out her lipstick. The chat immediately went into panic mode. "What are you thinking? Karen, please don't do it. This is going to be legendary. Do it, Queen." Karen felt the adrenaline. This was it, the moment that would make her go viral. She took a deep breath, straightened up, adjusted the fat rolls on her stomach, and holding the lipstick, firmly stepped forward with confidence. A few tourists nearby stopped, seeing her determined step. The air was thick with tension. Someone even pulled out a phone, sensing something big was about to happen. The guard, of course, remained motionless. But there was something about his stillness that made the situation even more intense. Karen was standing too close. So close, she could see the smallest details of the guard's uniform. The immaculately ironed red coat with shiny gold buttons, the black leather belt stretched across his chest, the white gloves gripping his rifle with the bayonet attached. But the most impressive element was his hat. Huge, made of black fur. It made him seem even more unyielding, even more untouchable. But today, that was all going to change. Karen was sure of it. The crowd begins to notice someone stopped, seeing her dangerous proximity. "What's she doing?" a teen's quiet voice asked, recording everything on his phone. "Damn, looks like something interesting is about to happen," his friend replied, pulling his hoodie tighter. A middle-aged woman with a backpack looked at Karen cautiously, then shifted her gaze to the guard. She already had a bad feeling. People walking by slowed down. Some turned around and took out their phones. Whispers spread through the crowd, like light electricity, charging the air. Of course, Karen felt all of this. She was thriving in the moment. Each phone directed at her. Each gaze, each comment. In her chat fueled her ego, like gas to a fire. The show begins. She smiled sweetly and squinted, eyeing the guard from head to toe. "All right, baby, don't move. You're going to be my personal Ken." She purred with fake sweetness, slowly twisting the lipstick cap. Her fat fingers snapped it open, and the air filled with the sweet smell of cheap strawberry scent. The guard didn't move. Not a single muscle in his face twitched. His gaze was beyond her, as if she didn't exist. The unyielding sentinel. A tall, lean man, with a wind-worn face, but without a glimmer of emotion. He stood like a stone statue, like a machine built for one purpose, to be unshakable. For him, Karen didn't exist. There was no crowd, no cameras, no laughter, no whispers. Only his duty. And it was this stillness that drove Karen. Even more wild. She wanted to break that barrier. She wanted him to react. She needed him to notice her. This was what the audience was waiting for. This was what the internet was waiting for. The crowd's reaction, first disapproving looks, started to appear in the crowd. An elderly British man in an elegant gray coat, with neatly trimmed gray hair, frowned in displeasure. He gripped his cane tighter and shook his head. "This woman has completely lost her sense of decency," he said quietly, but firmly. "This is the Royal Guard, not a circus." Nearby, a young mother with a little girl, about 5 years old, watched Karen with wide eyes. "Mommy, what's she doing?" The mother tensed up, clearly not wanting her child to watch this. "Just an uneducated woman, sweetie. Don't pay attention." But the crowd couldn't ignore it anymore. People started looking at each other. Some smiled, seeing it as a stupid antic, but others watched with disgust. Karen didn't hear them. She didn't see them. She only saw herself and the guard. The moment of truth. She reached forward, snapping her nails loudly. The raspberry lipstick sparkled in the sun. She brought it closer and closer to the face of the unmoving soldier. Karen didn't stop. A fire ignited in her eyes. She was sure that this would make her even more popular. She wasn't just standing next to the guard. She was determined to leave her mark on a ceremony where she didn't belong. In her hands, the red lipstick played its part. She twisted it open impatiently, oblivious to how everything around her was turning into something bigger than just a joke. Stepping in close, Karen took a step forward, holding the lipstick like a weapon, and tried to apply red lipstick to the guard's lips. He stood motionless, his expression stone cold, not reacting to her actions. But at that moment, Karen was already too close. Her face was just inches from his, and her fingers, holding the lipstick, trembled with excitement and anticipation. She barely touched his lips at first, gently, but with some confidence, gliding the color across his lips, as if testing whether she could make this moment even more unforgettable. The sensation of the makeup sliding across his skin, turning his face into a canvas, consumed her, and she was ready to apply another stroke. But then something happened that Karen didn't expect. The guard, sharply but controlled, as if deciding he could no longer ignore her invasion of his personal space, stepped forward. His shoulder collided with hers, roughly, but not too harshly, just enough to make her stagger and, with a cry of surprise, step back. Karen lost her balance and nearly fell onto the sidewalk, her legs buckling as she barely caught herself. At that moment, the lipstick flew from her hands, landing with a dull plop on the cobblestones in front of her, leaving a red stain on the pavement. The crowd gasped. It was as though everyone noticed the sudden, uncomfortable clash at once. People began whispering, and some even pulled out their phones to capture what had just happened. Karen, stunned, stood frozen, staring at the lipstick lying on the ground, unable to immediately process what had just occurred. But the moment of her defeat was already clear.
"Oh my God! Did he just push me?"
She screamed, unable to hide her outrage. Her voice, usually filled with confident energy, now trembled, almost fearful. She took a step back, not believing that this guard had dared to touch her. Her reaction drew the crowd's attention, and all eyes turned to her. Karen felt a strange disgust toward what was happening. This wasn't the effect she had hoped for. This moment wasn't funny, it wasn't a colorful show. All she felt was shame and discomfort. She tried to regain her confidence, but the crowd's mood had already shifted. Karen gripped her phone tightly, her heart racing faster. The adrenaline was doing its job. Now, all eyes were on her. The whole scene was hers, and she knew exactly what to do next. This wasn't just a show, it was the show, and she was the star. She glanced at the camera, waiting for her voice, full of emotion and outrage, to cut through the noise of the crowd. Her breath became more ragged, and her emotions intensified. Karen quickly held the phone up, pointing the camera at her face, and in that moment, when the crowd went still in anticipation, she exploded. "This jerk insulted me!" Her voice sliced through the air, hitting high notes. Karen could feel her words striking everyone who was listening. Her gaze was full of fury, and a theatrical grimace spread across her face. She paused, letting herself feel that sweet pain that comes when you become the victim in your own performance. With a sense of accomplishment, she continued, "I'm filing a complaint. He attacked me. Did you all see that?" Her words were like fire, fueled by emotion and ready-made accusations. Karen was sure her audience was losing their minds. This wasn't just a show. It was a full-blown exposé. The crowd gathered closer around her, and with each word she felt the attention intensify. People whispered, and some even pulled out their phones, filming her outrage. But just as she seemed ready to shout even louder, something changed. A man in a sharp black suit walked up to her. His eyes showed no interest in what was going on, just a cool, businesslike expression, like someone who was used to dealing with situations like this. He approached Karen, ignoring her words, and spoke in a clear, uncompromising tone. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises immediately." There was no threat in his voice, but something far more powerful, an absolute certainty that she had no right to stay there. He wasn't just a security guard. He was part of the system, one that dealt with such breaches without needing to say much. Karen froze. Her face, once twisted with rage and outrage, became momentarily blank, like someone who had just realized their performance was already meaningless. She looked at the guard, then at the crowd, which suddenly began to part, and the attention vanished as if it had burned out in the bright light. But most importantly, she saw that her audience, in essence, had stopped being her audience, and something in her chest tightened. "What? Why? I didn't do anything wrong." Her voice cracked with confusion. She tried to regain control, but something in her tone no longer sounded confident. Karen, still burning with emotion, stood frozen, unable to move from the spot. Her body trembled slightly from the intensity, and her face was flushed with a mix of shame and fury. She nervously adjusted her bright hair, now slightly tangled from the excitement, and wiped away tears from her lashes, trying to pull herself together. Her mind was in a storm. She was humiliated, but she couldn't afford to show it. Karen couldn't just walk away. She couldn't be just another tourist who takes a loss. She was the center of attention, and she had to win, at least in the eyes of her followers. Taking a deep breath, Karen grabbed her phone and quickly pointed the camera at herself. Her voice shook, but she tried to sound as confident as possible. In the next second, her face, contorted with a mix of dissatisfaction and the realization of failure, appeared on the screen. "Oh my God, the Brits are so rude," she said, staring into the camera with a look of complete confusion. "I was just trying to put on a show. I'm not the enemy, I just wanted to bring some fun." Her words came out sharp, but inside, Karen was furious because everything had gone off script. But she couldn't afford to let on how she truly felt. The problem was that her show had turned into something far less entertaining than her followers were expecting. Still, she kept filming. "You'll all see. I'll make a comeback," Karen said, trying to regain control. She hoped her determination and ambition would be seen as strength. But it was still hard to look at her reflection on the screen, feeling like she had just suffered a major defeat. She replayed the video in her mind, trying to pull something positive from it. But as she walked away from the square, tossing her hair back, her phone started pinging with new notifications. Laughter, mockery, and outrage. As soon as she posted the video, it went viral. People couldn't resist mocking her attempt to put makeup on the guardsman. The first memes began circulating online just minutes later. Everywhere she had once been the hero, now she was portrayed as a character in a comedy show. Her face was soon flooded with comments. Under her video, there were jokes like, "When you think you can do the guards' makeup but end up in a reality show. Who's going to try putting makeup on a statue next? Karen Lambert, 1. The guards, 0. Memes of her trying to do the guardsman's makeup flooded social media, and the shame was everywhere. In the comments, people played with her reputation. "Do you think he's going to be checking every move to make sure no one tries to do his makeup? Karen, seriously? This isn't your stage." Karen sat on a bench and looked at the screen of her phone. She was still in shock, but at that point, it didn't matter. The words she had tried to say with confidence now seemed hollow. The show was over, and it wasn't her skills, but the internet crowd, who decided who the real winner was. She looked at her phone again, unable to believe that in just one unfortunate moment, her name had become synonymous with disgrace in the eyes of many. And despite all her efforts to defend herself, it was clear, the internet never forgets.